Thank you, everybody, for joining. Nice to see you virtually, and we're right at the top of the hour, so let's begin. Welcome to today's webinar, and our topic and our title is the framework for a cross-disciplinary STEM core. Now, this webinar is brought to you by the project titled Preparing Technicians for the Future of Work. You can see it at the bottom of the slide there. Notice our URL, preparingtechnicians.org. And it's also brought to you by CORD. CORD, Leading Change in Education. For more than 40 years, CORD has created innovative educational tools and programs that empower faculty to prepare students for success in post-secondary education and careers. I'm your host for today's webinar, Mike Lasecki. Joining me and speaking later on will be Hope Cotner. She's the president and CEO of CORD, and Anne-Claire Anderson, who is the principal investigator of our project. Let me remind you again that this webinar will be recorded, and the slides in the recording will be available typically within 48 hours. We'll send out a notice about that, so feel free to share it with friends and colleagues. This webinar is live captioned, and if you look at the upper left of your screen, on the top there, there is a link to the live captioning service, and you see the link in the chat window as well. That does open up a caption in another browser window, just to let you know. What are we going to do today? We have three parts. Think about it in this way. In part one, you'll get a sense from me about the demand and what's driving this emerging technologies at the technician level. And then in part two, we'll discuss future-proofing. Isn't that a good word? Future-proofing technicians using the framework for cross-disciplinary STEM core. And in part three, we'll give you resources and tools to make it possible for you to integrate these things into your own program. Let's take a look at the next slide. So what's happening today? Well, all of us know that the nature of work is changing, right, at unprecedented speeds. And in fact, on that second bullet, it says technology advancements in machine learning and AI and industrial Internet of Things and robotics. Well, sure, it's eliminating some jobs, but it's creating others. All of us know that. Technicians sit at the center of much of this disruption, and we, as educators and workforce developers, must keep up. And we certainly know that our students' career paths are evolving, and they're evolving quickly. Let's go to the next slide. Our mission, what's our mission of the project? I'm not going to go on about our mission, but what we want to do is enable the NSF ATE community. Many of you are a direct part of that community, focusing on two-year college programs in STEM disciplines. There's our focus. We want to collaborate, enable you to collaborate with industry partners, work across disciplines, transform your programs to help prepare technicians for the future of work. How's that for a mission? There's a pretty strong mission. Let's take a look at this video to give you the context.
Our world is being shaped by new and emerging technologies. Artificial intelligence, big data, robotics, and machine learning are becoming as ubiquitous as electricity. Scientific and technological innovations are radically transforming society and the workplace, changing the way we think, educate, and lead. Our technician workforce is powering this transformation. Preparing tomorrow's STEM technicians with the knowledge and skills to remain competitive in this rapidly changing world has never been more critical. Technicians must expand their skill set so we can remain competitive in the global economy. This evolving landscape brings new challenges and opportunities for technician training and cross-disciplinary education. Now is the time to prepare our skilled technical workforce for the emerging workplace of the future. A workplace that includes technological innovation and is driven by data. Preparing Technicians for the Future of Work, a project of the National Science Foundation's Advanced Technological Education Program, is all about transforming technician education. As technology evolves, education must keep up. We can't predict the future, But through collaborations with educators and industry, we've learned that successful technicians will need new skills in data analysis and advanced digital literacy, and they'll need to understand the business processes that keep their company productive and efficient. Framing learning in the context of the future workplace will better prepare technicians for any STEM industry or sector. Tomorrow's technician needs to be prepared for the challenges ahead. Is your community ready? To connect with one of the ATE regional networks and learn how you can participate in preparing technicians for the future of work, visit our website at preparingtechnicians.org. The future of work is now.
Well, thank you, Anne Claire, for showing that. I should say something like, folks, right, that was a paid promotional advertisement or something like that, but I'm joking. But, empowering us to prepare the skilled technical workforce. That's what we're trying to do, right? And as we think, you don't have to read all these words here, but what we want to do is we've used the bold in first word of these things, empower community colleges to prepare technicians, promote regional collaboration, right? I know from working at community colleges myself that we learn so much from each other. And if we can promote that around this future of work, that'll be important. Our goal is also to, number 3, support these regional networks that are focused on this future of work topic. And finally, we want to foster the adoption, and you'll hear a lot more about this today, what we're referring to as the cross-disciplinary STEM core. As we're talking today, please use the chat window. You can make comments, you can ask questions, share information with us through that chat window. And thank you for doing that. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Remember, we promised about setting the stage here. We'll look at some of these indicators, right? Globally increasing demand for who? I love this title, this job title, right? Digital Transformation Specialist. There actually is a job title in some companies for that. Big data specialists, digital marketing folks, Internet of Things specialist, information security analyst. Many of you are familiar with these things, but all of us know a lot of these titles didn't even exist a number of years ago. So as we're moving forward, as we emerge into this future of work, we'll be seeing more of this. Part of our job is to keep our students aware of these things. Go ahead to the next slide, Anne Claire. What does this mean for the role of the technician and the way we prepare technicians for this role? I'm going to read this quote, but I don't like to read things from slides, but I'm going to read this one. As jobs come to be redefined by new modes of work, the result is a hybridization that mashes together skills from disparate domains and demands greater breadth and flexibility of the workforce. A good colleague of ours at one of the regional networks talks about the mashup of these skills, and I think that's an interesting aspect for today. Now, I've been talking, but let me ask you a question via the poll. So I'm going to pause for a minute, and you'll see a poll appear on your screen. Oh, Anne Claire, am I supposed to launch that, or are you launching it? Maybe I'm supposed to launch it. I'll go ahead and launch it. Okay, so on your screen, you'll see a poll that says, how do you identify what future technicians need to know and be able to do? So that's the question. Well, do you talk to your advisory board? Do you use direct connection with industry partners? Do you spend time researching industry and technology trends? Or do you talk with others about how they do it? And also there's another one. If you want to use the chat window and pop some other answers in, if you like, give us more details there. Lots of people streaming in here. I can see the data building up. We're going to show you the results in just a minute. I'm going to force you to act fast here. If you haven't clicked the button here, and by the way, you can choose multiple answers, you better hurry. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, end of the poll. I'm going to share the results of the poll. Look at this. It's amazing. Using my direct connections with industry partners is leading the pack, and that doesn't surprise me at all. But look at all these other approaches, advisory boards, researching, talking with others, and some other information as well. Good. Thank you, folks. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to close this poll. I'm now going to turn over the presentation to Anne Claire. Anne Claire, go ahead.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks, Mike, for setting the stage and giving the rationale behind why we do what we do. So we've heard from you about how you seek out industry and find out what the trends are and feed that back into your programs. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about what the project did, and you can kind of see here the types of people that we engaged and how that was an iterative process through focus groups and meetings. And so we met with subject matter experts and industry advisors and workforce specialists, and through their input, came up with some new fundamentals that are applicable across STEM technical programs. And based on all of this exploration, here are the STEM categories, knowledge and skills, big broad categories, and I'll show you some of the individual skills within those in a minute. This is what we believe will future-proof our STEM technicians coming out of two-year college programs: data knowledge and analysis, advanced digital literacy, and business knowledge and processes. To provide some structure for that cross-disciplinary STEM core, the project released the framework. That's how we'll refer to it in short, the framework for a cross-disciplinary STEM core. And it contains specific recommendations for steps that faculty and instructional leaders and employers and even community college presidents can take towards supporting the introduction of new technician skills, regardless of discipline or sector. In the framework, we lay out the need for multi-skilled technicians, as Mike was just talking about. We identify specific knowledge and skills that future technicians will need, and then lay out recommendations that colleges and college partners can take to integrate these concepts into their programs. Now let's look at the new skills, the cross-disciplinary STEM core, as identified in the framework. So for example, here are data knowledge and analysis skills needed across STEM technologies. Technicians need to be able to manipulate, interpret, compare, contrast, merge, and visualize, and I'd add communicate data in resolving issues and solving problems. They also need to be able to use Excel software and other common programs to a higher than beginner level. What this looks like in practice is, for example, a biotechnician using a data analysis tools to look for trends, or a geotech technician using data visualization to create a 3D model that shows physical changes in the environment. These examples would make good instructional scenarios, which is something that we'll talk about in a little bit. Within advanced digital literacy, STEM technicians need to be able to understand digital communications and all the networking, including cloud interfaces. They need to have an understanding of how cybersecurity works and why it's important, machine learning, sensors, various types of programming, human-machine interfaces, and all of this at a higher than introductory level. And business knowledge and processes, STEM technicians need to understand an enterprise. They need to understand its value chain and its business practices. Business knowledge includes work performance skills, as well as thinking about the ethics surrounding the adoption and use of incoming new technologies. So we've laid out what technicians need to know, but how do we get those new skills into technical programs that already have a lot of content that needs to be covered? How do we fit them into programs? The framework outlines some recommendations for adopting the core. And so prioritizing skills, determining integration points, using real world scenarios, which I hinted at, and which in April, our next webinar will go into in great detail how you would use those. Providing faculty development and shepherding systemic change. And there are roles for all of you doing those types of things. But let's first take the pulse. How ready are you to address these future skills, or where are you in the process already of adopting them? I'm going to post a poll. And I can only see poll 1. I need poll 2. Anybody see it?
Let me do that, Anne Claire.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
there you
it's
go.
up there now.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. So single choice on this one. When it comes to making sure my programs are addressing these future skills, where are you?
I wish I could say I was one of those 75% or higher ones, Anne Claire. I'm not quite there yet.
I'm kind of excited to see that we're all over the ballpark. It always makes discussion more interesting.
Okay, I'm going to give them one of my short countdowns, and then let's take a look at the results. Okay, everybody,
Thanks,
click
Mike.
those buttons, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, end poll, share results. There it is, Anne Claire. Most of us just starting to get there.
Well, welcome aboard. We're glad to have content to help you with this.
Good, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll.
Thank you.
Folks, if that poll still stays open, you can just close it yourself on your own screens. Thanks, Anne Claire.
So let's go into a bit of detail about each of your roles in making this happen and getting that cross-disciplinary STEM core, those new skills into technical programs. Faculty and instructional leaders can do a lot of things. A first start would be to inventory your existing programs and make the checklist. Okay, we are teaching these skills, we're not teaching these other skills. Look for what you're doing and where the gaps are. Where can you fill those in? The people who can best help you identify what to put in your program and give you some priorities to address would be your employers. So you would meet with them and prioritize, maybe the top 5 from each of those categories for your programs to address. You can always start small with, 2 or 3 and see how it goes. And we'll give you some tools for trying that. And that's how you would work together and identify where content most naturally could be integrated into what you're doing. It would also be helpful, given that, the brightest biotechnician I know or biotechnical instructor I know didn't know what digital twins were. It would be good to provide some professional development on topics that you want to infuse in a cross-disciplinary way so that instructors are on the same page with you and are not overwhelmed by learning new content at the same time. Employer partners, of course, they would be shepherded by the college into these experiences, but they're the ones who can help you prioritize what your region needs in terms of these STEM core topics. They can also work with you to develop real-world scenarios. How would a technician encounter this particular core STEM cross-disciplinary skill? Where would they encounter it in an industry scenario in the everyday world? Or maybe, it's once a month they need this skill. Those are the kind of things that an employer can help you identify. And then there's even a role for community college presidents. When we talk about being the champion of a systemic approach, for a president to support preparing technicians in the future for the future of work using a cross-disciplinary approach, it really helps when you have that level of support. And it also helps when your president is engaged on an ongoing basis with industry in your region. They need to know, they need to be on the same page with your technical programs for them to flourish. But the good news is I've said all this out, but you don't have to go it alone. We have some kind of jumpstart resources for you that I'm going to let Hope talk to you about in a minute. Let's see. There you go, Hope. Thanks.
Okay, great. I have the easy job. I get to share all of the goodies. So here we go. Here are the tools and resources that the project has developed to help you take action. And I'm sure each of you are thinking about where you are in that adoption phase based upon your answer to the polls, colleagues that you know that certainly are pushing ahead, and others that you may need to, tug along a little bit. So I would say, first and foremost, take a copy of that framework, download it, and share it with colleagues. It's not lengthy. It won't keep you up at night, but it certainly does have some good food for thought. You can access the framework on the Preparing Technicians website under the tab Our Work. It's the first thing right there under that tab. You can also take advantage of our podcasts, which feature some cutting edge industry interviews. We've got recorded webinars. We're building those with this series, like the one you're participating in today. And then we also have some instructional cards for you to use in class. So, Anne-Claire, let's take a look at those first ones. All right, so here we go with the podcasts. And you may see there, episode 37. We're almost on episode 38 now. So there's a whole host of resources for you to listen to. Those can be found under the resources tab on the website. And in each podcast episode, Mike interviews influential leaders from education and from industry, and they share their insights to inform you about trends that are impacting the future of work. And the conversations are very interesting from people from companies such as Amazon, Intel, UPS, Universal Robotics, and it really helps give us a deeper understanding of the rapid changes that they're experiencing in their workplaces and how they are approaching those changes and sharing strategies for innovations in their fields. Also on the podcast page, you'll see something that we call What Should Educators Know and Do About Preparing Technicians for the Future of Work? And that's what that little matrix is, the great reference that highlights key takeaways from each podcast. So you can quickly find the technology or the skill featured in an episode along with that podcast's key discoveries, and then suggested actions and resources for classroom use. And now let's look at those scenario-based tools. Anne-Claire mentioned offering and teaching some of these cross-disciplinary skills within the context of the workplace is certainly the way to go. And we have a growing collection of what we call instructional cards to help you do that. To support the implementation of the framework, we have scenario-based instructional cards in those three categories: the data knowledge and analysis, advanced digital literacy, and business knowledge and processes. Currently, we have 12 available, but more are on the way. And there's also a glossary of the cross-disciplinary STEM core skills that's a great reference tool as well. Let's take a look at this actual material. There's student content, and you'll see here in the student materials, there's several pages of content, but for the most part, they are very concise. There's a definition, some basic vocabulary related to the topic, an example of how a technician is using this skill in a work setting, which really sets the stage and provides that important context. And there's some skill descriptions, information about colleges that are actually teaching these skills and what programs you might find them in if you're interested, and then where the topic is headed in the future. Then for the instructors, this is really a self-contained classroom activity. So everything you need to introduce these concepts in kind of a micro lesson format is here for you. You'll see the essential competencies, a much more academic definition of the particular skill area, the scenario, of course, and then a lot of great resource links for instructors to expand their own knowledge, and the description of the activity, the steps to follow to implement it, and then some additional resources that can be used along with the activity. There's even a great warm-up question on each card as well. So take a look at those. We think you'll find something worth exploring. And then the webinar series is just getting underway. So you're hearing about the framework today. Next month, we'll be really taking a deeper dive into each of the instructional cards, how people can use them in the classroom, and some insights from some of our subject matter experts that develop these. And then our last one, a future of work, integrating emerging technologies. You'll hear from colleagues from Moraine Valley Community College as they talk about how they have been implementing some of these cross-disciplinary STEM core skill areas and what that looks like in practice, both in particular courses as well as across the disciplines. And I think I pass the baton back to Mike to see what kind of questions we may have in the chat.
Hope we do have a question, and to answer it, could you go back to the second of the data visualization cards? That's it. So no, the next one, please. The one that talks about the technician competencies and cross-disciplinary skills. Folks, you see those on the lower left there? So a question that came into the chat window, could this result in a new knowledge KSA analysis, right? Knowledge, skills, and abilities analysis. Should this result in it? Could it? Well, I think my answer is we're setting the stage for that, because as we look at these three big buckets and then the 15 or so topical areas under each one, data visualization is an example, right? It's underneath data knowledge and analysis. We've laid out key technician competencies and cross-disciplinary skills. I think that can help set up the analysis of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that one would need. So I think we've laid the groundwork there, the foundation rather, but I don't think we exactly have that, set up as a KSA analysis yet, but it's a good question. So if anyone else has, Ann Beheeler, thank you, Ann. I know you're well known to our projects. I like your comment here in chat. This can be codified into a KSA, and she can help. How about that? Thank you, Ann, for doing that. So that helps us as we think about modifying our courses and curriculum. Hope, it seems intimidating, right? You look at those three buckets and all those topics. How am I going to address all of those things? Hope, do we have to address all of those? What's your thoughts about that?
Well, my thoughts are to ask your employer partners and really get them to prioritize the lists, each of those skill areas, take a deeper dive and explore those, and then take a look at the opportunities within your existing courses to integrate a topic or two. You don't have to jump in with both feet, pick an instructional card and maybe one skill area, infuse that and see how that goes and how students respond to it. If you listen to podcast 37, you'll hear Christine Christensen talking about how some of the work that they've done in beginning to infuse these cross-disciplinary skills has really piqued the interest of students at their institution in potentially moving toward a different, not necessarily completely different major, if you will, but perhaps another area in which they might want to invest their talents within the broad fields that they're exploring.
I'd like to add an experience from one of our regional networks where they have taken this idea out to employers, and employers said, you know what? It's the advanced digital literacy is the most critical of the buckets for us right now. So we're going to start with that column of skills and see where we go with that before we add anything from the other columns. And that is a perfectly reasonable way to do that. We want this to be regionally customized. There is no one size fits all.
Perfect, Ann Claire. Thanks for that comment. Colleagues, we wanted to hit you hard and fast today with this 30-minute introduction and invite you to join us in the future, about a month from now. Next webinar, using these scenario-based instructional cards. I think they can be very valuable. You can print them, actually print them. Imagine that, printing something today. But I think you can use them for your students as well as for yourselves. On behalf of our project, Preparing Technicians for the Future of Work, and CORD, Thank you very much for attending today's webinar and participating in the chat. As you exit today, guess what's going to happen? A new browser window opens and there's a brief couple of questions survey. We want your answers to help us improve these series of webcasts. Thank you very much for joining today. We're perfectly on time. See you in April.